The doorbell rings at 2:47 in the afternoon. Sarah Mitchell is folding laundry in her living room when she hears it, that familiar chime echoing through her suburban home in Henderson, Nevada. She glances toward the front door, visible through the archway from where she stands. Through the frosted glass panel, she can make out a silhouette, a figure standing motionless on her porch. Something about the way the person stands there, perfectly still, sends an uncomfortable prickle down her spine. She sets down the shirt she's holding and walks slowly toward the entrance, her hand reaching for the doorknob before she stops herself. Instead, she moves to the window beside the door and peers through the curtain. Before we go any further, I want you to sit back, get comfortable, because what I'm about to share with you is going to make you question every time someone unexpected shows up at your door. And if you're intrigued by true stories that'll keep you up at night, make sure you subscribe because we dive deep into cases like this every single week. What you're about to hear is the account of an ordinary Tuesday afternoon that turned into something Sarah would never forget, something that would make national headlines and spark conversations about safety, intuition, and the strangers we encounter in our everyday lives. This isn't just about what happened at Sarah's door that day. It's about the choices we make in split seconds, the instincts we've learned to ignore, and why sometimes the most terrifying encounters are the ones that seem completely ordinary at first glance. By the end of this story, you'll understand why Sarah's decision in those first few moments may have saved her life, and why the footage from her doorbell camera became one of the most analyzed pieces of evidence in a case that would span 3 states and involve dozens of potential victims. The man standing on Sarah's porch looks normal enough. Mid-30s, clean-cut, wearing khaki pants and a blue button-down shirt. He's holding a clipboard, and there's a lanyard around his neck with what appears to be some kind of identification badge. In his other hand, he carries a large black duffel bag. To any casual observer, he looks like he could be a surveyor, a utility worker, maybe someone conducting a neighborhood assessment. But Sarah notices something that makes her pause. His shoes are wrong. They're expensive dress shoes, polished to a shine, not the kind of practical footwear someone doing door-to-door field work would wear. It's a small detail, almost insignificant, but it lodges itself in her mind like a splinter. She doesn't open the door. Instead, she calls out through it, asking what he needs. The man smiles, a broad, friendly smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes, and holds up his clipboard. He explains that he's conducting a water quality survey for the county and needs to come inside to check her tap water and inspect her water heater. He speaks clearly, professionally, using official-sounding terminology about pH levels and mineral content and federal regulations. Everything about his presentation seems legitimate except for that persistent feeling in Sarah's gut that something is off. She tells him she'll need to see proper identification. The man's smile tightens slightly. He holds up the badge hanging from his lanyard, pressing it against the glass panel of the door. The photo looks like him, and there's text that includes the words Water Quality Inspector, and what appears to be a county seal, but the glass distorts the image enough that Sarah can't read the fine print clearly. Here's where Sarah makes the first decision that probably saves her life. She tells the man to wait a moment, that she needs to verify his credentials with the county office. She moves away from the door, pulling her phone from her pocket, and she watches through the window as the man's expression changes. The friendly smile disappears completely. His jaw clenches. He looks down at his clipboard, then back at the door, then over his shoulder toward the street. He shifts the duffel bag from one hand to the other, and Sarah notices how heavy it seems, how it pulls at his arm with substantial weight. She's already dialing the non-emergency number for the county utilities office when she sees him reach into his pocket and pull out his phone, typing rapidly with his thumb. He's no longer looking at her door. He seems agitated, distracted. The county office answers, and Sarah explains the situation. There's a pause on the other end of the line. Then the representative asks her to describe the man again. Sarah does, adding details about the badge, the clipboard, the duffel bag. Another pause, longer this time. The representative's voice becomes more serious. They have no water quality inspectors working in her neighborhood today. In fact, they never send inspectors door to door without advance written notice mailed to residents at least 2 weeks prior. The representative asks if the man is still there. Sarah looks back toward the door. He is, but now he's pacing on her porch, still focused on his phone, typing urgently. The representative tells Sarah to stay inside, lock all her doors, and they're going to transfer her to the police department right now. What Sarah doesn't know yet is that this man has been in her neighborhood for the past 3 hours, and she's the 7th house where he's rung the doorbell. At the first house, no one was home. At the second, an elderly man answered and let him inside after seeing the badge. The man spent 12 minutes in that house before leaving. At the third house, a young mother with 2 small children declined to let him in but didn't think to call authorities. The fourth house also empty. The fifth house, a teenage girl home alone, opened the door but became suspicious when the man asked if her parents were home, how many people lived there, whether they had a security system. She closed the door and locked it, watching as he stood on the porch for several minutes before finally leaving. The sixth house, another no answer. And now Sarah's house, number 7. The police dispatcher tells Sarah to stay on the line and keep the doors locked. Officers are being dispatched to her location immediately. Sarah moves to a window where she can watch the front porch without being easily seen. The man is now standing still again, his phone pressed to his ear, having what appears to be an animated conversation with someone. He's gesturing with his free hand, the duffel bag now set down at his feet. Sarah watches his body language change from agitated to alert. He ends the call, picks up the bag, and suddenly he's walking quickly down the porch steps toward a vehicle parked 2 houses down, a dark blue sedan with no obvious company markings or identification. He doesn't run, but he moves with purpose, with urgency. Within seconds, he's in the car, and Sarah hears the engine start. She's describing all of this to the dispatcher when she hears sirens in the distance, growing closer. The sedan pulls away from the curb, not speeding but moving steadily down the residential street. Sarah gives the dispatcher the license plate number, reading it off clearly as the vehicle passes in front of her house. The first police cruiser turns onto her street just as the sedan reaches the stop sign at the corner. For a moment, it seems like the timing might be perfect, like the police might intercept him right there. But the sedan turns left and accelerates, and the police cruiser pulls up in front of Sarah's house instead. The dispatcher confirms that other units are pursuing the vehicle and tells Sarah that officers are at her door now. 2 officers come to Sarah's house, and she shows them the footage from her doorbell camera. The video is crystal clear, capturing the man's face in good afternoon light, every detail of his clothing, the badge, the clipboard, and that heavy duffel bag. One of the officers makes a call while watching the footage, and Sarah sees his expression change as he listens to whoever's on the other end. He asks Sarah if she minds if a detective comes to speak with her. She agrees, and within 40 minutes, her living room is occupied by Detective James Morrison and his partner, Detective Linda Chen, both from the Henderson Police Department's Special Victims Unit. What they tell her makes her blood run cold. The man in her doorbell footage is suspected of being involved in at least 3 home invasions across Nevada and Arizona over the past 8 months. In each case, he gained entry by posing as a utilities worker or inspector. Once inside, he would quickly assess whether anyone else was home, and if the resident was alone and vulnerable, he would threaten them, bind them, and rob the house, taking cash, jewelry, and small electronics that could be easily transported and sold. In 2 of the cases, the victims were physically assaulted. In one case, a woman was held captive in her own home for over 6 hours while the perpetrator methodically went through every room, every drawer, every hiding place. The psychological trauma in all cases was severe. But here's what makes this case different. What makes the detectives particularly interested in Sarah's footage? In none of the previous cases did they have clear video of the suspect's face. Victims described him, security cameras caught distant or obscured images, but nothing like this, nothing this detailed and definitive. Sarah's doorbell camera may have just provided the break they needed. The detectives spend over 2 hours with Sarah, walking through every detail of the encounter, examining the footage from multiple angles, making notes about his appearance, his demeanor, his methods. They're particularly interested in the phone call he made, the agitated conversation, the sudden departure. They believe he might have been calling an accomplice, someone who warned him that Sarah was onto him or that police had been notified. The license plate Sarah provided turns out to be registered to a rental car company. The vehicle was rented 3 days earlier using a credit card and driver's license that, when investigators check them, turn out to be fraudulent. The car is found abandoned in a shopping mall parking lot 30 miles away. Inside, investigators discover the clipboard, the fake badge, and several other identification cards with the same man's photo but different names and titles. They find business cards for utility companies, inspection services, and home security consultancies. But it's what they find in the trunk that reveals the true horror of what Sarah avoided. The duffel bag is there, and inside it are zip ties, duct tape, rope, a taser, a knife, and a handgun. There are also gloves, plastic sheeting, and cleaning supplies. This wasn't just equipment for robbery. This was a kit designed for something much worse. Detective Morrison tells Sarah later, weeks after the initial incident, that she made every right decision that day, trusting her instincts about the shoes, about the general sense that something was wrong. Not opening the door despite the professional appearance and official story. Deciding to verify his credentials instead of just accepting them. Watching him from a position of safety. Getting the license plate number. Every choice she made created a barrier between her and potential harm. And every choice gave law enforcement more information to work with. He tells her that the elderly man at the second house that day wasn't so lucky. The man let the intruder inside, and although he wasn't physically harmed, he was tied up in his bedroom while the suspect ransacked his home. The man was found 3 hours later when his daughter stopped by for a scheduled visit. The psychological impact on him has been devastating, destroying his sense of safety in the home where he'd lived for 40 years. The investigation expands rapidly. The doorbell footage is distributed to law enforcement agencies across multiple states. Within days, detectives in California, Utah, and New Mexico contact the Henderson Police Department. They have similar cases, similar victim reports, and the man in Sarah's video matches descriptions from several of their investigations. The pattern becomes clearer. The suspect targets suburban neighborhoods with a mix of demographics, looking for homes where someone might be alone during weekday afternoons. He seems to prefer areas without strong neighborhood watch programs or obvious security systems. He scouts locations in advance, sometimes spending several days observing traffic patterns and resident schedules before making his approach. He's patient, methodical, and when he encounters resistance or suspicion, he retreats and moves on to find an easier target. Tips start coming in from the public after the footage is shared on social media and local news. Several people report having similar encounters, describing a man matching the suspect's description, attempting to gain entry to their homes with various pretexts. A woman in Phoenix says he claimed to be a fire inspector checking smoke detectors. A retired couple in Salt Lake City reports a man with a clipboard saying he needed to verify their address for updated emergency services records. A college student in Sacramento describes someone insisting he needed to inspect the electrical panel for code violations. In each case, something made these potential victims hesitate, ask questions, or refuse entry, and the man left without incident. But for each person who turned him away, investigators fear there are victims who didn't, victims who might not have reported the crimes out of shame, fear, or confusion. 3 weeks after the incident at Sarah's door, a break comes from an unexpected source. A woman named Jennifer Torres in Tucson sees the doorbell camera footage on a Facebook share and immediately calls the police. She knows this man. He worked at a call center with her 2 years ago. His name is Marcus Webb, or at least that's what he called himself then. She remembers him as quiet, polite, someone who kept to himself but occasionally would linger near female co-workers' desks, asking oddly personal questions about their living situations, whether they lived alone, what their schedules were like. She remembers feeling uncomfortable around him and being relieved when he left the company after a few months. She never knew why he left, just that he was gone one day without notice. The name Marcus Webb gives investigators something concrete to work with. Employment records from the call center provide a social security number, which leads to previous addresses, previous jobs, previous identities. The real Marcus Webb turns out to be a man in Kentucky who had his identity stolen 6 years ago and has been dealing with the fallout ever since. But the paper trail from the identity theft leads investigators to other names, other stolen identities, and eventually to surveillance footage from an electronics store in Las Vegas where someone matching the suspect's description is seen purchasing burner phones and prepaid credit cards. That footage is time-stamped, location-specific, and when investigators pull traffic camera data from surrounding streets, they track a vehicle, not the rental sedan but a white cargo van, to a storage facility on the outskirts of the city. A warrant is obtained for the storage unit rented under one of the fake identities. Inside, investigators find a disturbing collection of materials. There are dozens of fake ID badges representing various companies and agencies. There are clipboard templates for different types of official forms. There are detailed maps of suburban neighborhoods in multiple cities with certain houses marked, notes about schedules and residents. There are photographs, dozens of them, appearing to be surveillance photos of homes and residents taken from a distance. Some of the photos show people in their homes through windows, going about their daily activities, unaware they're being watched. There are 3 more duffel bags, each containing equipment similar to what was found in the rental car, clearly prepared for multiple operations. And perhaps most chillingly, there's a laptop computer. The forensic analysis of the laptop reveals a carefully organized system of files. There are folders named for different cities, containing detailed reconnaissance information about neighborhoods and potential targets. There are spreadsheets tracking attempted and successful home entries, noting dates, addresses, outcomes, and what was taken. There are communication logs showing messages with at least 2 other individuals who appear to be part of a network, possibly purchasing stolen goods or providing logistical support. And there are videos recorded on what appears to be a hidden camera, showing several of the home invasions in progress. These videos would prove to be key evidence in eventually prosecuting the case, but they're also profoundly disturbing, showing the fear and helplessness of victims in their own homes. 2 months after Sarah's doorbell rang, the suspect is apprehended at a motel in Reno. He's arrested without incident by a joint task force that includes FBI agents and officers from multiple local jurisdictions. His real name turns out to be Daniel Arthur Patterson, a 34-year-old man with a criminal history going back to his teenage years, including previous convictions for burglary, identity theft, and assault. He'd been released from prison in California 3 years earlier after serving a reduced sentence, and within months had resumed criminal activity, gradually escalating from simple theft to the more elaborate and violent home invasion scheme. At the time of his arrest, he has cash, jewelry, and electronics in his motel room that investigators later matched to several recent burglaries, including the robbery of the elderly man in Sarah's neighborhood. The case against Patterson is overwhelming. The doorbell footage provides clear identification. The rental car and storage unit connect him to the equipment and planning materials. The laptop contains his own documentation of crimes. Victims from multiple states identify him from photo lineups. DNA evidence links him to several crime scenes. He's charged with over 30 counts including home invasion, robbery, assault, kidnapping, weapons violations, and identity theft across 4 different states. The prosecution coordinates what will become one of the more complex multi-jurisdictional cases the region has seen in years. But this story isn't really about Daniel Patterson's arrest and prosecution. It's about that moment on a Tuesday afternoon when Sarah Mitchell heard her doorbell ring and something in her intuition told her to be careful. It's about the split-second decisions we make that can alter the trajectory of our lives. It's about the importance of trusting our instincts even when we can't immediately articulate why something feels wrong. It's about the small details we notice, like shoes that don't match someone's supposed profession, or a smile that seems just a little too practiced, or a weight to a bag that seems excessive for carrying clipboards and water testing equipment. In the aftermath, Sarah talks about how she'd been watching true crime documentaries, how she'd read articles about home invasions and had conversations with friends about safety. She'd never imagined she would be in that situation herself, standing on the other side of her front door from someone who meant her harm. She talks about how in the moment, part of her felt silly for being suspicious, how there was pressure in her own mind to be polite, to not offend this official-looking person by questioning his credentials, to just open the door because that's what we're socially conditioned to do when someone rings the bell and appears to have legitimate business. But another part of her, the part that noticed those wrong shoes and felt that prickle of warning, refused to ignore the discomfort. That part of her made her stop, verify, protect herself. Detective Morrison uses Sarah's case in training now, teaching other officers about the value of doorbell cameras and residential security systems, but more importantly, teaching community groups about trusting their instincts and verifying credentials before allowing strangers into their homes. He emphasizes that legitimate utility workers, inspectors, and service people understand that residents have a right to verify their identity. They expect questions. They're prepared to wait while you make a phone call to confirm they're supposed to be there. Anyone who becomes agitated or pushy when asked for verification is someone you should be suspicious of. Anyone who tries to rush you into making a decision, who emphasizes urgency or uses intimidation tactics involving regulations or penalties, is someone you should not trust. The story spreads beyond Henderson, becoming national news not because of its uniqueness but because of its universality. Everyone has answered a door. Everyone has had unexpected visitors. Everyone has felt that moment of uncertainty about whether to trust the person standing on their porch. Sarah's experience becomes a teaching moment for millions of people who see the doorbell footage on news programs, who read articles about the case, who share the story with family and friends. The conversation it sparks is about more than just this one criminal. It's about vulnerability in our own homes, about the masks predators wear, about the importance of security measures, and about the value of community awareness and communication. Sarah installs additional security cameras around her property. She joins her neighborhood watch program and helps organize information sessions about home safety. She connects with several of Patterson's other victims through a support group facilitated by victim services, finding solidarity and healing in shared experience. She processes the trauma of knowing how close she came to becoming another statistic, another victim, another cautionary tale. She works with a therapist to address the anxiety that develops around being home alone, around answering doors, around the vulnerability she now feels in spaces where she used to feel completely safe. But she also acknowledges a strange sense of empowerment. Her decisions that day mattered. Her instincts were right. Her actions potentially prevented harm not just to herself but to others who might have been Patterson's subsequent victims had he not been caught. The evidence she helped provide through her doorbell footage and quick thinking contributed directly to his apprehension and prosecution. In a situation designed by a predator to strip her of power, she retained it through awareness and action. That matters to her. It helps in the healing. A year later, Daniel Patterson pleads guilty to avoid trial, accepting a plea deal that will keep him in prison for a minimum of 35 years. The plea spares victims the trauma of testifying, though several submit impact statements that are read during sentencing. Sarah attends the hearing. She looks at Patterson across the courtroom, this man who stood on her porch with his fake badge and his duffel bag full of weapons and restraints, and she feels no fear. She feels anger at what he did to others. She feels sadness for the victims who didn't have the chance to protect themselves as she did. She feels gratitude for the instincts and awareness that kept her safe. And she feels determination to continue sharing her story so others might benefit from it. The doorbell camera footage, that brief few minutes of video showing a man standing on a suburban porch on a sunny Tuesday afternoon, becomes a permanent part of law enforcement training materials. It's shown in community safety presentations. It's referenced in news segments about home security. It's shared on social media with captions about trusting your gut and verifying credentials. That ordinary-looking man in khaki pants and a button-down shirt becomes the face of a cautionary tale about the predators who move among us wearing masks of normalcy and legitimacy. This is the reality we live in. Most people who ring our doorbells are exactly who they appear to be, conducting exactly the business they claim. But some aren't. Some are looking for vulnerabilities to exploit, for opportunities to harm, for victims who will trust too easily or question too little. The challenge is discerning which is which in the moment, with incomplete information and social pressure to be accommodating. Sarah's story teaches us that it's okay to be suspicious. It's okay to verify. It's okay to trust the feeling that something isn't right even if you can't immediately explain why. It's okay to prioritize your safety over someone else's convenience, or your own discomfort with seeming rude or paranoid. Your safety, your well-being, your right to feel secure in your own home, these things matter more than social niceties. They matter more than not wanting to offend. They matter more than worrying about seeming suspicious or paranoid. The person on the other side of your door, if they have legitimate business, will understand. And if they don't understand, if they become aggressive or pushy or angry that you're asking questions, then you have your answer about their true intentions. Trust yourself. Trust your instincts. Trust that feeling of wrongness when something doesn't add up. And protect yourself without apology. If this story has made you think differently about answering your door, about trusting strangers, about the importance of verification and security measures, then it served its purpose. If it's made you uncomfortable or more aware or more cautious, that's not a bad thing. Awareness isn't paranoia. Caution isn't fearfulness. They're intelligent responses to genuine risks in a world where predators exist and often look nothing like what we expect them to look like. So subscribe to this channel, stay informed, share these stories with people you care about, and most importantly, stay safe. Because the next ring at your door might just be a delivery, or a neighbor, or someone conducting legitimate business. But then again, it might not be. And knowing the difference could save your life.